Fireside Tales for Wolfgang, Episode 36. Greetings and salutations. I'm Hunter Ackerman, here to read some classic literature for you. What is the difference between a theorem and a theory? And that's a great question. Honestly, I never actually thought about the difference between the two, as obvious as that might be because of the similarity of the words. So the easiest way to break these two words into their categories of understanding, theorem, understandings. Theorems have to do with math. Theories have to do with science. So I'm going to break them down that way first. Now, here's the difference, a difference between math and science. Math is clean, idealized, essential, and perfect. So, one theorem in math is that the angles of a triangle all add up to 180 degrees all the time, every time. And in math, it's very easy to think of an essential triangle, to draw out a perfect triangle. And all the lines are perfectly straight, and all the internal angles are, for example, 60 degrees, 60 degrees, and 60 degrees, because it's a perfect triangle. However, I go into the shop, I've got some really good saws in my shop, but if I try to construct the perfect triangle, I'm going to be off by some margin of error. It might look pretty damn perfect to you and me, but there's a margin of error that those lines aren't perfectly straight, and those angles don't actually come out to be 60 degrees each. Maybe one of them's 59.5 and another one was 60.5, and one of them is 60 degrees, and they kind of come out to looking close enough to a perfect triangle that you'll look at this piece of woodwork and say, my, what a perfect triangle. Why did you make a perfect triangle out of wood? Same kind of thing applies if you go to SpaceX, if you go to the people who built the CERN lab underneath Geneva, Switzerland, and you pay them a big pile of money and ask, construct me the most perfect triangle constructible. They will turn you out a triangle that is almost perfect. And they will tell you to a lot of significant digits what their margin of error and how close they got it to perfect. So math is the realm of the idealized, the perfect. 1 + 1 will always equal 2. It's never ambiguous. A theorem is provable because in math, things are provable. Theorem is defined as a general proposition not necessarily self-evident, but proved by a chain of reasoning. It is a truth established by means of accepted truths. Pythagoras' theorem is probably the most famous that most people will have ever heard of. However, ironically, Pythagoras didn't actually come up with it. And if you didn't know this, I don't remember if I mentioned this on a Fireside Tale specifically. Pythagoras was the leader of one of the strangest cults I think history has to offer. He was in charge of a math cult that celebrated what became to be known as the Pythagorean theorem, which states that if we're talking about a right triangle, it's got a 90-degree angle in it, then the square of the hypotenuse, the longest leg, is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. But again, this is just a simple example of a theorem Another one, to give you another simple example, is that squares have 4 right angles, 4 90-degree angles. So the internal angles of all squares will always add up to be 360 degrees, 90 times 4. It's a theorem. It is simply mathematically proven to be true. So let's move to the world of real science. We live in a messy universe. That's simple. Everything that we think that we know about the universe that we gather through science is through something called inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning always has a little bit of doubt in it. There's always a door left open. Science, here's the big difference between science and math. Science never proves anything. Science either supports a conclusion or it disproves that conclusion. So the conclusions that are around for multiple centuries that no one has been able to disprove, those are the ones that we put stock in. But we don't say that it is not improvable. We also never close the door and say, this might have turned out to be wrong. And if it does turn out to be wrong, we will understand why we thought it was the case given the information that we had at the time. So, a theory. Let me build up to theory. Theorem, because it's the clean, perfect, surgically pristine world of math. It's much easier to define, even in concept. Theory is misused in colloquial English as to be something like an untested guess. It's often in conversation used to imply that something is unproven, or it's just speculative, or it's untested. And that is precisely not right. So the way that we construct a theory is we gather simple basic facts. For example, we can say it's bright outside. And I look at my watch while I'm inside saying it's bright outside. And I'm going to say, it is daytime, the sun is up. It is bright outside because the sun is up. I've now formed a hypothesis that the sun is up based on the fact that I look out the window and it seems bright, based on the fact that I looked at my watch and see that it is daytime hours. So I've made a hypothesis. This hypothesis is testable. I can walk outside and look up into the sky. Do I see the sun? Oh, I do. Hypothesis is confirmed. I could have been wrong. I could have had neighbors that have really bright spotlights and they are actively looking to prank me in some way. My domestic partner may have gone around and changed all the clocks in the house, including my wife, because he, she, they, non-binary, my partner, my domestic partner might be in on the joke with my neighbor. And the hypothesis that the sun is up fails when I look outside and see that the brightness was not actually caused by the sun being up. Okay, so you get the idea of what a hypothesis is from that, I hope. A theory is that which collects all of the hypotheses under one explanatory umbrella. It takes all the facts, it takes all the hypotheses that we can test, and it turns it into one big, testable umbrella that is the collection of all of these things together. A theory, as I said, should be also testable. So we should have criteria to know if this theory were not true. A theory should also make predictions into the future. A couple of really good examples of theory in this case would be, for example, the germ theory of disease. Nobody questions that anymore. We know bacteria exist. We know viruses exist. We know they cause disease. The germ theory of disease is in no way, shape, or form not a fact just because we put theory in front of it. In fact, theory in this case is something of a trophy for the germ theory of disease. It has outlasted so many experiments that would easily prove it wrong if it were simply wrong, that it would be demoted from theory to untruth that we used to think was the case. An example of this could be phrenology. Phrenology used to be this science about the shape of your head leading to particular personality traits or leading to predictability of your IQ. If your head is shaped this way versus this way, you are probably smarter. If your head is shaped this way versus the other way, you are probably dumber. It makes a prediction that would be testable. Aggressive people, as it turned out, did not have heads shaped in a particular way, nor did smarter people nor dumber people have heads shaped in this or that way. It was through science that we discovered that phrenology is not a real science. So why should we trust science if it could possibly be wrong or different tomorrow? Because tomorrow, science was better than it was yesterday. So, a theory is this extraordinarily powerful explanation based on facts, based on hypotheses, that makes predictions about the future. But we never shut the door as to say we are now party to the entire truth in an unamendable sort of way. And so science never proves theories. Similarly, anyone that disregards the theory of evolution as only a theory is both unaware of what evolution actually is, means, states, predicts, and does, and they are unaware of what a theory actually is. That's something you should be on the lookout for. In good science fiction, when they say something like, we're going to try to do this with the spaceship, we should be able to do this and not die, in theory. In well-written science fiction, they're taking some physical principle that might be manipulated to their survival. The test isn't the test of their theory. The test is whether or not I can pilot the ship in such a way that makes the crew survive, according to this theory. They're not questioning whether or not the theory is true. They're questioning whether or not we can survive based on what I think I can do because of what I know about how the universe works based on this theory. In bad science fiction, it's just conjecture. In badly written science fiction is, we should be able to do this. In theory, theories have been tested. Theories have stood the test of time. Or theories go into the trash bin of history in the category of stuff we used to believe, and now through better science, we know better.
You are listening to Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang, originally broadcast on GWC Productions' YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura, on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media.
We're going to get into something called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. So this is going to be relevant to tonight's story. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is this thing where the first time you hear a particular word or a phrase or concept, that all of a sudden then you start seeing it everywhere. I'm not going to say that your cell phone is not spying on you, but when you've been in private conversation with your mom, and then suddenly all these ads start popping up on all your social media, the lurking variable, to use a statistics term here, is that your phone actively listening, which, maybe it is, or are you just now noticing the things that you just recently talked about? When it's the latter, that's the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. They did a great episode on South Park, like over a decade ago. They were talking about cold reading. And so this is like the supposedly psychic phenomenon. I say supposedly psychic because cold reading is the trick that people like Jonathan Edwards do, whereby they take a little bit of information and then they sort of lead the audience to the next question, and they do it so skillfully that it seems like they have some sort of supernatural insight. When you get a new car and see that same car all over the place, and, well, in the South Park episode, like a psychic or someone told Kyle to look for 3 doves, and then he starts seeing 3 doves everywhere. In the Terminator series, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, there was like a mid-season arc where she saw 3 dots written in blood on a wall, and then she started seeing 3 dots like everywhere she looked. And it's again, I'm not making this strong statement that your phones are not listening to you and that it's total illusion. I'm just saying, when it wasn't that, when they weren't listening to you, when there were no phones around, and yet you see those things popping up all over the place, that is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. By O. Henry, an author that I've shared many times before. The dude was prolific and brilliant, and it's like virtually all in public domain now. So, as you will see, Tobin's Palm delves with the garnering of superstition. And in this particular case, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, as well as confirmation bias. More on that later. The story is Tobin's Palm by O. Henry. Tobin and me, the two of us, went down to Coney one day. There was $4 between us, and Tobin had needed distractions. Katie Mahorner was his sweetheart of County Sligo. She was lost since she started for America 3 months before with $200, which were her own savings, and $100 from the sale of Tobin's inherited estate, which was a fine cottage and a pig on the Bog Shanah. Since that letter that Tobin got saying that she had started to come to him, not a bit of news had he heard or seen of Katie Mahorner. Tobin advertised in the papers. Nothing could be found of the little Irish girl. So, to Coney, me and Tobin went, thinking that a turn at the chutes and the smell of popcorn might raise the heart in his bosom. But Tobin, he was a hard-headed man. The sadness just stuck in his skin. He ground his teeth at the crying balloons. He cursed the moving pictures, and though he would drink whenever asked, he scorned Punch and Judy and was all about licking the tiny-type men as they came. So, I gets him down a sideway on a boardwalk where the attractions is somewhat less violent. At a little 6x8 stall, Tobin halts, with a more human look in his eye. "It's there," he says. "It's right there. I'll be diverted. I'll have the palm of my hand investigated by the wonderful palmist of the Nile and see if what is to be will be." See, Tobin was a believer in signs and the unnatural and the supernatural. He possessed illegal convictions in his mind along the subjects of black cats, lucky numbers, the weather predictions in the paper. He went into that enchanted chicken coop, which was fixed, mysterious, with red cloth and pictures of hands with lines crossing over them like a railroad center. A sign over the door says it is Madame Zozo, the Egyptian palmist. There was a fat woman inside in a red jumper. The red jumper had pot hooks and beasts embroidered all over it. Tobin gives her 10 cents, extends one of her hands. She lifts Tobin's hand and examines it to see if it's a stone in the frog or a cast shoe he's come for. "Man," says this Madame Zozo, "the line of your fate shows..." Wait. It's not my foot at all," says Tobin, interrupting. "Sure, it's no beauty, but you're holding the palm of my hand." "The thin line shows," says the madam, "that you've not yet arrived at your time of life without bad luck. And there's more to come. The Mount of Venus shows that you've been in love. There's been trouble in your life on account of your sweetheart." "It's Katie Mahorner she's got references with," whispers Tobin to me in a kind of a loud voice, but off to the side. "I see," says the palmist, "a great deal of sorrow and tribulation with one whom ye cannot forget. I see the lines of designation points to the letter K and the letter M in her name." All right, says Tobin to me. "You hear that?" "Look out," goes on this palmist, "for a dark man and a light woman, for they'll both bring you trouble. You will make a voyage upon the water very soon and have A financial loss. I see one line that brings good luck. There is a man coming into your life who will fetch you good fortune. You'll know him when you see him by his crooked nose. That's pretty good. Is his name set down? Asks Tobin. Was it going to be convenient in the way of breathing when he backs up to dump off this truckload of the good luck at my feet? His name, says the palmist, thoughtfully, looking at his hands, intently. His name is not spelled out by the lines, but they indicate one long one, and the letter O should be in his long name. There's no more to tell. Good evening, gentlemen. Don't block the door on your way out. My God, that's wonderful how she knows, Tobin says to me as we walk to the pier. As we squeeze through the gates, a dark man sticks his lighted cigar against Tobin's ear, and there's trouble. Tobin hammers the man's neck, and women standing around start squealing, and by presence of mind, I drag the little man out of the way before the police come. Tobin's always in an ugly mood when he's enjoying himself, yeah? On the boat going back, when the man calls, "Who wants a good-looking waiter?" Tobin tried to plead guilty, feeling the desire to blow the foam off a crock of suds, but when he felt in his pocket, he found himself discharged for lack of evidence. Somebody had disturbed his change during that commotion. So we sat dry upon the stools, listening to the musicians fiddling on deck. If anything, Tobin was in lower spirits and even less congenial with his misfortunes than when we had started. On a seat against the railing was a young woman dressed suitable for red, fast automobiles with hair the color of an unsmoked meerschaum. Meerschaum, by the way, is a fancy word for one of those clay pipes that are kind of lightweight and white in color, you know? Unsmoked, so pretty pure white, this thing. In passing by, Tobin kicks her foot without intention, and being polite to ladies when in drink, he tries to give his hat a twist while apologizing, but he knocks it off and the wind carries it overboard. So Tobin came back, sat back down. I began to look out for him, for the man's adversaries were becoming rather frequent. He was apt, when pushed so close by hard luck, to kick the best-dressed man he could see and try to take command of the boat. Presently, Tobin grabs my arm and says, real excited like, "John," he says, "you know what they're doing? You know what we're doing? We're taking a voyage on the water." "There now," says I. "Subdue yourself. The boat'll land in 10 minutes more." Look, says he. "At that lady over there upon the bench, have you forgotten the dark man that burned my ear? Isn't the money that I had gone? That's $1.65 it was, right?" I thought he was no more than summing up his catastrophes, so as to get... I thought he was looking for an excuse in summing up his catastrophes to get violent, as men will do when they have good excuse, and I tried to make him understand such things was just trifles. Don't make no sense, Tobin. "But listen," says Tobin, "you got no ear for the gift of prophecy or the miracles of the inspired. What did the lady palmist tell you out of my hand? It's coming true before your eyes. Look out," says she, "for a dark man and a light woman. They'll bring you trouble. Did you forget the dark man? Though he got some of it back from my fist, now I'll give him that. But can you show me a lighter woman than that blonde lady that was the cause of my hat falling in the water? And where's the $1.65 I had in my vest when we left the shooting gallery? All right, the way Tobin put it, it did seem to corroborate the art of prediction, though it looked to me that these accidents could happen to anyone at Coney Island without the implication of palmistry being true or real. Tobin got up and walked around on deck looking close at the passengers out of his little red eyes. I asked him the interpretation of his movements. You never know what Tobin has in mind until he begins to carrying it out. Well, you should know, says he. I'm working out the salvation promised by the lines in my palm. I'm looking for the crooked-nosed man that's to bring the good luck. It's all that'll save us. Christ, John, did you ever see a straighter-nosed gang of hellions in all the days of all your life? Straight-nosed people all around us here. It was the 9:30 boat, and we landed and walked uptown through 22nd Street, Tobin being without his hat. On a street corner, standing under a gaslight and looking over the elevated road at the moon, was a man. A long, tall man he was, dressed decent, with a cigar between his teeth. But I saw that his nose made two twists from bridge to end like the wriggle of a snake. Tobin saw it at the same time, and I heard him breathe hard like a horse when you take the saddle off. He went straight up to the man, and I went with him. Hey, good evening to you, Tobin says to the man. The man takes out his cigar, passes the compliments, sociable-like. So, would you hand us your name? Asked Tobin. Let us look at the size of it. It might be our duty to become acquainted with you. Well, my name, says the man all polite-like, is Friedenhausman. Maximus G. Friedenhausman. Yeah, it's the right length, says Tobin. Do you spell it with an O anywhere down the stretch of it? I do not, says the man. Could you spell it with an O? Inquires Tobin, turning visibly anxious here. The man with the nose replies, if your conscience is indisposed toward foreign idioms, you may, to please yourself, smuggle the letter into the penultimate syllable. Ah, that's good, says Tobin. You're in the presence of John Malone and Daniel Tobin. 'Tis highly appreciated, said the man with the bow. And now, since I cannot conceive that you would hold a spelling bee upon the street corner, will you name some reasonable excuse for being at large, as it were? Well, yes, it's simple. It's by the two signs, answers Tobin, trying to explain, which you display according to the reading of the Egyptian palmist from the sole of my hand. You've been nominated to offset with good luck the lines of trouble leading to the dark man and the blonde lady with her feet crossed in the boat, beside the financial loss of $1.65, all so far fulfilled according to Hoyle. By the way, according to Hoyle is this old-timey expression meaning according to the rules. There was this guy named Hoyle who put out a lot of rule books on games, most especially around cards. With that, the man stopped smoking and he focused on me. Have you any amendments, he asked, to offer to that statement, or are you one too? I thought by the looks of you, you might have him in charge.
None, says I to him, except that as one horseshoe resembles another, so are you the picture of good luck as predicted by the hand of my friend. If not, then the lines of Tobin's hand may have just been crossed. I don't know.
Well, there's two of you, says the man with the nose, looking up and down for the sight of a policeman. I've enjoyed your company immensely, gentlemen. I bid you adieu.
With that, he shoves his cigar in his mouth and he moves across the street, stepping real fast, but Tobin sticks close to one side of him and me at the other.
What?
Says he, stopping on the opposite sidewalk, pushing his hat back.
Do you follow me, sir?
I tell you, he says real loud,
I'm proud to have met you, but it is my desire to be rid of you presently. I am off to my home.
Do, says Tobin, leaning against his sleeve. Do be off to your home, and I'll sit at the door of it till you come out in the morning, for the dependence is upon you to obviate the curse of the dark man and the blonde lady and the financial loss of the $1.65.
'Tis a strange hallucination,
says the man, turning to me as the more reasonable lunatic.
Hadn't you better get him home?
Listen, man, says I to him, Daniel Tobin is only as sensible as he ever was. Maybe he's a bit deranged on account of having drink enough to disturb him, but not enough drink to settle his wits, but he's no more than following out the legitimate path of his superstitions and his predicaments, which I'll be happy to explain to you. With that, I relate the facts about the palmist lady and how the finger of suspicion points to him as an instrument of good fortune. Now, I understand, I conclude, I understand my position in this whole riot. I am the friend of my friend, Daniel Tobin, according to my interpretations of friendship. It's easy to be a friend of the prosperous, because that pays. It's not hard to be a friend of the poor. You get puffed up by gratitude. You got your picture printed standing in front of a tenement with a scuttle of coal and an orphan in each hand. But it strains the art of friendship to be a true friend to a born fool. And that's what I'm doing, says I. For in my opinion, there's no fortune to be read from the palm of my hand that wasn't printed there with the handle of a pick. And although you got the crookedest nose in New York City, I doubt that all the fortune tellers doing business could milk good luck from you. But the lines of Danny's hand pointed to you, straight out and fair, and I'll assist him to experiment with you until he's convinced that you're dry. After that, the man turns, suddenly, to laughing. He leans against a corner and he's just laughing considerable. He claps me and Tobin on the backs and he takes us by an arm each.
"'Tis my mistake," says he. "How could I be expecting anything so fine and wonderful to be turning the corner upon me? I came near being found unworthy. Hard by," says he, "is a cafe, snug and suitable for the entertainment of idiosyncrasies. Let us go there and have a drink while we discuss the unavailability of the categorical."
So saying, he marched me and Tobin to the back of the room of the saloon, and he ordered the drinks. He laid the money on the table. He looks at me and Tobin like brothers of his, and we all have the cigars from the man's pocket.
"You must know," says this man of destiny, "that my walk in life is one that is called the literary. I wander abroad by night, seeking idiosyncrasies in the masses and truth in the heavens above. When you came upon me, I was in contemplation of the elevated road in conjunction with the chief luminary of the night. The rapid transit is poetry and art.
The moon but a tedious, dry body, moving by rote. But these are private opinions, for in the business of literature, the conditions are reversed. 'Tis my hope to write a book to explain the strange things I have discovered in life.
"You're gonna put me in a book?" says Tobin, disgusted. "You're gonna put me in a book?"
I will not, says the man, fairly. For the covers would not hold you, my friend. Not yet. The best I can do is enjoy you myself, for the time is not ripe for destroying the limitations of print. You would look fantastic in type. All alone by myself, must I drink this cup of joy. But I thank you, boys. I am truly grateful.
"The talk of you," says Tobin, blowing through his mustache and pounding the table with his fist. "The talk of you is an eyesore to my patience. There was good luck promised out of the crook of your nose. But you bear fruit like the bang of a drum. You resemble, with your noise of books, the wind blowing through a crack. Sure, now, I would be thinking the palm of my hand lied, but for the coming true of the dark man and the blonde lady and the loss of—" "What?" said the long man.
"Would you be led astray by physiognomy?"
This is talking about his face shape and his expression now.
"My nose will do what it can within its bounds. Let us have these glasses filled again, for 'tis good to keep idiosyncrasies well moistened, they being subject to deterioration in a dry, moral atmosphere."
I love the little disclaimer that idiosyncrasies only work best when we're drinking and that they kind of go dry when we go sober. That's the subtext, is literary term for that. So, the man of literature makes good, to my notion, because he pays, cheerful, for everything. The capital of me and Tobin being exhausted by prediction. But Tobin is sore. He drinks real quiet, with the red showing in his eye. By and by, we move out, for it's 11 o'clock and we stand a bit upon the sidewalk. Then the man says he must be going home and he invites me and Tobin to walk that way. So we arrives on a side street 2 blocks away where there's a stretch of brick houses with high stoops and iron fences. Man stops at one of them and he looks up at the top windows, which he finds dark.
"'Tis my humble dwelling," says he, and I begin to perceive by the signs that my wife has retired to slumber. Therefore, I will venture a bit in the way of hospitality. 'Tis my wish that you enter the basement room where we dine and partake of a reasonable refreshment. There will be some fine cold fowl and cheese and a bottle or 2 of ale. You will be welcome to enter and eat, for I am indebted to you for your amusing diversions."
Well, the appetite and conscience of me and Tobin were both congenial to the proposition, though it was sticking hard in Danny's superstitions to think that a few drinks and a cold lunch should represent the good fortune promised to him by the palm of his hand.
"Step down the steps," says the man with the crooked nose, "and I will enter by the door above and let you in. I will ask the new girl we have in the kitchen," says he, "to make you a pot of coffee to drink before you go. 'Tis fine coffee Katie Mahorner makes for such a green girl as she, landed in this country only 3 months. Step in," says the man, "and I'll send her down to you." Yeah. Damn, I like that story.
I love that story because of the mix of what's going on there. In the universe of this particular Coney Island, it's ambiguous as to whether palm readers are doing something legitimate or it's all coincidence. For most of it, it looks like it's total coincidence. But of course, it's brilliantly set up in the first paragraph of the story that Tobin is upset because he loves this woman. She's sailing to the United States. They lost track of each other. They can't find each other. He's got money invested in her. I mean, it was right there in the exposition that she paid $200 for her coming to America. He paid $100 of it. And the mysterious intellectual stranger at the very end turns out to have employed this young woman as a servant in his household and is, at the twist of incredibly good fortune, saying he's going to coincidentally send this girl down to serve them both coffee, right? So what is real? That's where we left. That's where we go. What is real? So the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, what is that? Already referred to that earlier. At the beginning of the show, the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon is sometimes called a frequency bias. And once you are aware of the existence of a thing for the first time, you'll start seeing it more and more often throughout everywhere. This is crazy, by the way, if you ever get into any kind of like plant lore or animal lore, where you start learning the names of specific birds, then you go for a walk in the forest and you start seeing that type of bird everywhere. It's a function of how the human brain works. So, Oscar Wilde said, the difference between journalism and literature is that journalism is unreadable and literature is not read. Thus, we do things like this show. So, Oscar Wilde was born in 1854 and died in 1900, so not a long-lived guy. Died at 46. He was an Irish author, and it's been said that he was born at the wrong time. He had personal proclivities that were anathema to his time and place. He was a gifted and prolific writer with quick wit. Wilde seems like he could succeed writing in any form he chose, and he was apparently just an incredible conversationalist, very sociable, charismatic, quick-witted guy. He was an incredible journalist, novelist, short story writer, essayist. He ultimately really made a calling for himself as the preeminent playwright of his day. Like so many other artists and great writers, he died destitute and young at 46. So Oscar Wilde, he wrote one novel, and it happens to be one of my favorites. Might even be describable as more of a novella. It's short. The Picture of Dorian Gray. It was published in 1890, and do I love that book? I can't recommend highly enough that you read The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's just a little too long to sit down and do it like in just one episode of Fireside Tales. Maybe I'll just break it up and do that, read that sometime in multiple parts. That would be interesting. But it was a literary success and a societal scandal. The editor of the magazine where it was published thought it was indecent and bordering even on obscene for its moral decadence. He took out 500 words without permission from Oscar Wilde. Critics just attacked Oscar Wilde. And while he defended himself in his novel and his view of art, he did temper some of the writing when the full-length version of the book appeared the following year. The trouble was that rather than circle the old maypole of moral value and good deeds, the picture of Dorian Gray incorporated decadence, depravity, duplicity, and shallow beauty. Wilde seemed to prevail and emerged from the scuffle, determined to inject his ideas into dramatic plays, which would also allow him to launch his social commentary. And of course, if your stuff is too decadent for the literary world, you can always find actors who will put it on a stage for you. So, this poem is called The Disciple. And it's really clever. It seems to be about Narcissus, who was reported to be a man that was just so beautiful. He was goddesses fell in love with him, and his curse was that he was also too in love with himself. He was just paralyzed by self-love. But here's a really interesting take in poetry form on the death of Narcissus. This is called The Disciple by Oscar Wilde. When Narcissus died, the pool of his pleasure changed from a cup of sweet water into a cup of salt tears, and the Oreads came weeping through the woodland that they might sing to the pool and give it comfort. And when they saw that the pool had changed from a cup of sweet waters into a cup of salt tears, they loosened the green tresses of their hair and cried to the pool and said, "We do not wonder that you should mourn in this matter, for Narcissus, so beautiful was he." "But was Narcissus beautiful?" said the pool. "Who should know that better than you?" answered the Oreads. "Us did he ever pass by, but you he sought for, and would lie on your banks and look down at you, and in the mirror of your waters he would mirror his own beauty." And the pool answered, "But I loved Narcissus because, as he lay on my banks and looked down at me, in the mirror of his eyes, I saw ever my own beauty mirrored." I love that. The reflexive quality of that is, man, what a clever guy, that Oscar Wilde. In 1907, there was, I think he was a doctor. I don't think I'm pretty sure Duncan McDougall published a study in 1907. Oh, he was a physician from the East Coast. And McDougall had hypothesized that souls have an actual tangible weight, that upon death, this would be measurable. And he tried to do this. So he tried to get patients that were dying of things that were very fatiguing, So he wasn't looking at like seizure patients who are like moving around a lot as they die. He was looking at patients that are like slowly wasting away so as not to disrupt the scales. He was trying to be kind of careful. One of the measurements that he got in weighing people at the moment of death was one of his patients lost 21.3 grams. So, unfortunately, this is one of the sloppiest experiments perhaps ever performed in any kind of scientific environment. He had an extremely small sample size. He only had 6 patients. He only really got the measurements that he was looking for in one of those 6 patients. And what made it bad science was he found weak reasons to disregard all of the other conclusions that did not come to the evidence he was looking for, right? And he did try to propose a control. So because he was a Christian physician, this is where it gets really silly. Because he was a Christian, he also inferred that humans have souls and only humans have souls. So as a control, he weighed several dogs at the moment of death. Presumably he poisoned them. And when he could not make any of the dogs lose weight at the moment of death, he said, okay, this is confirming exactly what we would expect to see. Now we just have to see it in a few more humans. And yeah, this is actually, sometimes this is cited as selective reporting, so where you're cherry picking the results that you want to have in there. And so, but I don't know, maybe just because it's such an interesting premise, it became known, and it's still popularized as this 21 gram soul experiment. There was a movie that was made. I think I even saw the movie a decade or more ago. And in this, the movie, as I recall, the movie had like shockingly little to do with any of the things that I just now discussed. So it was kind of irrelevant. So what it amounted to, by the way, is essentially his scale that he was using to weigh bodies upon their death was sensitive enough to get fluctuations within grams, but under such sloppy conditions that some of the bodies actually gained weight upon their death, which was like, all right, that's clearly not, so it was all within a margin of error. That's the bottom line of this experiment, and that's why it's considered to be a terribly sloppy experiment. He was cherry-picking the data that would enforce or back up or support his conclusion, and he was disregarding the data that didn't, and all of his data could be simply explained as to being within the results, being within an error bar.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of
Fireside Tales for Wolfgang.
To view more of my work, check out my YouTube channel at Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. Directed by Hunter Ackerman. Produced by GWC Productions.
The show is dedicated to the memory of my best friend, Wolfgang Beastly. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions' YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura, on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network.
Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media, either on Spectrum Charter Channel 32 or on AT&T Uverse Channel 99